Should we be shielding children from the news this summer? The stories coming out of Gaza spring to mind, as do the story about MH17, the second serious crash this year. Well, joining me is Nikki Cox. She's editor of First News, which is a weekly newspaper for 17 to 14-year-olds, and also Jennifer Howes. She's co-founder of BritMums, a website for parent bloggers. Thank you very much, both of you, for joining us here this afternoon. Nikki, let's start with you first of all. As a publisher, lots and lots of stories coming out of Gaza, and a lot of them are about children. How do you go about reporting this story, if you do at all, and do you actually include specific stories about children, for instance, those 4 children who were killed on the beach when they were playing football?
We do. Our policy is that anything that we think children will have heard about anyway in the news, because news now is 24/7 coming at them on the radio, obviously front pages that they can see in newsagents, on the internet, on obviously TV channels like Sky News. They're hearing about it anyway, and if they haven't heard it from there, it's being talked about in the playground. So our policy is that if they're hearing about it anyway, we're concerned that they may have heard a half story and they haven't heard exactly what's happened. So we give them an accurate version. Clearly we sanitize it. We make sure that we don't scare them. We would withhold any particularly graphic details or graphic images. But we say it as it is. We tell them the news. But also we're very careful to point out the fact that news in effect is something that's happening that's not normal, because that's what makes it news. And we make the point, for instance, with the plane crashes, to say that at any one time there are between 50,000 and 100,000 planes in the air around the world. You know, and the fact that one crashes every now and again, very rare. So we try to allay their fears at the same time telling them, you know, the full story of what they've probably been hearing anyway.
Jennifer, if I can just bring in you, what are your thoughts on this? Is it something that you do think that newspapers, children's newspapers, should be tackling, or is it actually something that's just totally down to the parents and they should be dealing with these subjects?
Well, I think it's a great idea for newspapers to tackle it. There's a lot of stories out there. Kids are going to be hearing it when their parents are listening to the radio, reading magazines or newspapers or watching TV. And so sometimes those reports that are geared toward mature audiences, adults, are going to have information in them that a parent might prefer their child not hear. So it's good to have that filter on there. And depending on the age of the child, there are ways you might want to simplify it. If you have a teen who's constantly on social media, they're seeing stuff there that's being tweeted, they may be following news sites themselves, they need a certain kind of filter and analysis from parents, whereas younger children may need more of a kind of outline sketch where you can describe why things are going on or why certain things are happening.
I suppose one of the differences here is that you can prepare to have that birds and the bees chat, or, you know, Santa Claus isn't real kind of chat, but these are unexpected. And how do you prepare for them when, say, you are in the car and the news comes on the radio and they're saying, Mummy, what does it mean when somebody's been shot or killed, or, you know, they were just playing football? Why were they hurt?
Well, often I've certainly been listening to news and my daughter walks into the room, she's 10, and I've turned the news off. She might ask what it's about, and I give a little précis of what's happening. So that does happen, and sometimes it can be really difficult, especially when a news story like what's going on in Gaza, what's going on in Syria. It can be difficult for adults even to understand what's going on. It's perfectly acceptable for parents to turn something off, to say, we're not going to talk about that right now, or just to discuss it in the broadest of strokes. But it is important that parents convey the fact that news isn't just something that happens elsewhere. Bad things don't just happen elsewhere, that this is a world we live in. It's a great opportunity to teach kids about the wider world.
So, Jennifer, I have had a tweet from someone, Mark Johnson, Mr_Nice 1976, so there's a lot of Mr. Nices out there. He says they do show some harsh footage before the watershed. How do you balance things with, say, children being able to see what is reality, some very harsh footage, and the fact that some children this holiday could potentially be inside playing what are some quite violent computer games which aren't reality? That's sort of a balance that people have to make, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I think when you, as a parent, when you look at what's happening in the real world and you look at video games that might portray killing or shooting or wartime conditions in a entertainment environment, it does make you realize that you're going to need to filter that for your children. You're going to need to describe to them how these things are not alike, and in a way that these are very serious situations. Should we be making light of them? That's also a good jumping off point as a parent to describe why you don't want them to play, a game, why a game is rated over 16 or over 18. Certainly summer is a time when kids are exposed to TV more, to social media more. It's a perfect opportunity to have those discussions.
And Nikki, with you thinking a little bit more about the images that children are exposed to, you obviously have lots of pictures and videos that in the office you look at and you're trying to filter through. I've had another tweet from @Scouse Cinders saying no child in the world should have to see a dead child on the news, let alone thousands. What's the sort of process that you go through? We know that you have covered the Gaza story, you've had it in your publication, and you have also tackled the subject of children in the country. What do you do when you're thinking about what pictures to include? Because you actually have decided not to include a sort of one of the picture that I suppose is a bit like what's on the front page of The Guardian this morning, but you have actually tackled the issue, I suppose, in the words. What do you think about when you think about pictures?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, the filter that you were talking about just now is exactly our job. I was on Twitter the other day. I woke up in the morning, went onto Twitter, and there were several pictures of dead children in Gaza. I didn't want to see that myself, let alone expose children to that. It's horrific, it's frightening, it's terribly sad. And obviously we filter those. We make sure that we don't show pictures like that, but we do explain what's going on. And the other thing I think with First News is that we're not competing with other daily papers and radio stations and news stations to be first. We react afterwards. We would run the news story as it happens, but then we would run a full page, as I've shown you, on what's going on in Gaza, what's the history, how did the situation arise, what's going on right now, and what's likely to happen in the future. And we show maps, we show where Gaza is. And funnily enough, as you again were just saying, that we get letters and emails from parents saying thanks very much because we didn't understand what was going on, and so they read First News too with their children and are able to have it as a platform for discussion, of a discussion between them.
Jennifer, do you think there is the temptation to maybe sort of calm them, not dumb it down, but to say, you don't worry, it's not too serious, or is it correct that you do go in and say that does happen and this is why, and be quite matter-of-fact about it when, for instance, you might see such an image as a young child?
I think there can be an impulse to play down those kind of images or those kind of stories, but being matter-of-fact about it is very important, and it's a way of answering children's curiosity. Children are naturally curious. They want to know what's going on. They want to understand the world. And so by saying, yes, that happened, it's very sad, we can talk more about why that kind of thing is happening. So as a parent, you can still do it on your own terms while acknowledging that the information is out there and the child may really have questions about it.
OK, Jennifer and Nikki, thank you very much. I suppose a tweet from @Chris1966 kind of reflects what you just said at the end there, saying, try to shield nieces from 9/11 when younger, and they ended up knowing more than me. It's impossible to shield them from all this news. Ladies, thank you very much for your time this afternoon.